I was scheduled to leave the house at 5:30 in the morning. My suitcase sat by the door, and my plane ticket was tucked inside my wallet. But there was one small problem. I was not going anywhere. As I walked down the stairs, I found my husband in the kitchen, whispering into his phone with frantic urgency. He turned, his face pale, and asked the only question he had left. "You did not leave?" I smiled. "Trip canceled. My name is Delaney Mitchell, and for the last 8 years, I have made a living out of detecting the smallest fractures in corporate integrity. As the senior manager of ethics and compliance at Sterling Ridge Compliance in Charlotte, North Carolina, my days are defined by red flags, conflicts of interest, and the subtle, often silent language of deceit. I am 36 years old, and I have trained myself to look at a perfectly balanced spreadsheet and see the one number that does not belong. I know that people lie not because they are inherently evil, but because they believe they are smarter than the system they are trying to cheat. They believe that if they bury a secret deep enough, or layer it under enough administrative noise, it will simply cease to exist. They are wrong. Every lie leaves a trace. Every secret has a price tag. And as I stood in the foyer of my own home at 6 in the morning, holding a suitcase that was supposed to be halfway to Atlanta, I realized that the biggest compliance violation of my life was happening in my own kitchen. The morning had started with the chaotic efficiency that defined my life. I was scheduled to fly out for a 2-day seminar on regulatory frameworks. I had packed with military precision the night before. My blazer was pressed. My itinerary was synced. But the airline industry cares very little for precision. A mechanical failure coupled with a sudden scheduling collapse had grounded the flight before I even cleared security. The airline offered a rebooking for late afternoon, but the seminar began at noon. It was pointless. I canceled the ticket, took a refund, and decided to drive back home to sleep for another 3 hours before heading into the Sterling Ridge office. I did not call my husband. Graham. I thought it would be a nice surprise. We had been married for 5 years, and lately, our schedules had been like passing ships in a fog. Graham, at 39, ran his own boutique consulting firm, or at least that is what the tax returns said. He was often up early, pacing the house with a coffee in hand, stressing over client acquisition. I thought I would walk in, make us breakfast, and maybe we could steal an hour of normalcy before the world demanded our attention. The house was silent when I unlocked the front door. It is a large, colonial-style build in a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of house that echoes if you walk too heavily. I set my suitcase down gently, mostly out of habit not to scratch the hardwood, and that was when I heard him. Graham was in the kitchen. The layout of our ground floor is open, but the angle of the foyer wall obscured me from his view. His voice was low, not the booming, confident baritone he used with clients, but a hushed, urgent whisper. It was the tone of a man trying to keep a fire from spreading. I froze. In my line of work, we call this the initial audit finding. You do not move. You listen. I know, Graham said. His voice was tight. The room is already booked. Just go straight up. Do not wait in the lobby. I stood there, my hand still resting on the handle of my suitcase. My heart did not race. It slowed down. A cold, heavy sensation settled in my chest, like swallowing a stone. And listen, he continued, the urgency ratcheting up a notch. Do not use your card anymore. I told you. The paper trail is the problem. Put it on the incidentals account if you have to, but keep your name off the main ledger. Do not use your card anymore. That was not a conversation about a surprise birthday party. That was not a conversation about a client dinner. That was instructions on how to hide. I took a step forward. My heel clicked on the floorboard. Graham spun around. The look on his face was not just surprise. It was devastation. It was the look of a man who had just watched the scaffolding of his life collapse in real time. He was wearing his navy suit trousers and a crisp white shirt, holding a coffee mug that was halfway to his mouth. The mug jerked, spilling hot liquid over his knuckles. But he did not even flinch. He just stared at me. His skin went a pale, sickly gray. His eyes darted from my face to the suitcase, then back to my eyes, searching for a reason, An explanation. A ghost. He started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again, forcing a tone of casual confusion that landed nowhere near the target. You didn't leave? It was the question of a man who had bet everything on my absence. I looked at him. I looked at the coffee dripping onto the floor. I looked at the phone he was clutching so tightly his knuckles were white. 1,000 screams rose in my throat, hot and violent, demanding to know who was on the other end of the line, who was not supposed to use their card, who was waiting in a hotel room. But I am a compliance officer. I do not scream. I investigate. I smiled. It was a thin, sharp thing, barely a curvature of the lips. I placed my phone on the hallway table with a deliberate, soft click. Trip canceled, I said. My voice was steady, terrifyingly steady. Graham froze. I watched the reaction in slow motion. It was a masterclass in guilt. His left eye twitched, a tiny, involuntary spasm at the corner. His hand, the one not holding the phone, gripped the edge of the granite island as if the floor were tilting beneath him. Then came the smile, a forced, rictus grin that did not reach his eyes. "Oh," he said. "Oh, wow. That is too bad. I mean, good for me, right? I get you back." He laughed. It was a hollow, breathless sound. He quickly tapped the screen of his phone, ending the call without saying goodbye, and slid it into his pocket, screen facing his thigh. "Airline issues?" he asked, walking toward me, trying to bridge the physical distance to mask the emotional chasm that had just opened up. "Mechanical," I lied. It was a half-truth. They canceled the flight, no other options that worked. I walked past him into the kitchen to get a glass of water. I needed to see if he would track my movements, if he was guarding the space. He turned, pivoting his body so he was always facing me, blocking the counter where his briefcase lay. "Well," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, I was just handling a crisis with a client. Early morning fires. You know how it is." "I heard," I said. I took a sip of water, looking at him over the rim of the glass. "Sounded intense. Someone having trouble with a credit card?" The color drained from his face again, then rushed back in a flush of red. "What? Oh, yeah, billing dispute. Boring stuff. Look, I have to run. I have an early meeting downtown. Since you are home, maybe we can do dinner? Celebration of the canceled trip?" He was desperate to leave. He needed to get out of the house to manage the disaster I had just walked in on. "Maybe," I said. "I am going to go upstairs and change. Wash the airport off me." "Great. Good. I will call you later." He grabbed his briefcase and keys, pecking me on the cheek. His lips were cold. He smelled of the cologne I had bought him for Christmas, a scent that now made my stomach turn. He rushed out the door, and for the first time in 5 years, he did not say "I love you." I waited until I heard the garage door close and the sound of his sedan fading down the street. Then, I set the glass down. My hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a cold, clinical clarity. I went upstairs to our bedroom. The bed was made, but the pillows were slightly askew on his side. On the bedside table sat our shared iPad. We used it for reading news, controlling the smart home features, and occasionally streaming movies. It was linked to the family cloud account. Graham was careful. He had a passcode on his phone that changed every month. He had a laptop that required a fingerprint. But arrogance makes people sloppy in the places they think are safe. He did not think I would check the iPad, because the iPad was neutral territory. I tapped the screen. It unlocked. I did not go to his messages. He would delete those. I did not go to his call log. He would clear that. I went to the email app. The primary account was our shared household email, but buried in the sidebar was a secondary account he had added months ago for quick access to his consulting documents. G. Hollis Consulting. He had forgotten to sign out. I refreshed the inbox. At 5:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before I walked through the door, a confirmation email had arrived. Reservation confirmed. The Grand Bohemian Hotel. Charlotte. Guest. G. Hollis. Room type. Executive suite. Check-in. Today. I stared at the screen. The Grand Bohemian was in Uptown, less than 20 minutes from our house. He was not going to a meeting. He was going to check in. He was going to meet someone who had been told to go straight up and not wait in the lobby. But it was the next email down that made my blood run cold. It was a notification from the car service application, the one I used for my airport transfers. The subject line read, "Your trip has been updated." I opened it. The timestamp on the change was from 2 days ago. My original pickup time had been scheduled for 6 in the morning. Someone had logged into my account and moved it to 4:30 in the morning, ensuring I would be out of the house well before dawn, ensuring I would be gone before the sun came up. I sat down on the edge of the bed. This was not just an affair. Cheating is impulsive. It is a crime of passion and opportunity. This was logistics. This was operational planning. Graham had not just hoped I would be gone. He had actively manipulated my schedule to ensure I was removed from the premises. He had orchestrated my exit so he could bring someone else into his life, or perhaps into a life he was building with my money. My thumb hovered over the delete button. I wanted to erase the evidence, to scream, to call him and demand an explanation, but the compliance officer in me took over. Documentation is defense. I took my own phone and took photos of the emails on the iPad screen. I captured the timestamps. I captured the reservation number. I captured the modification to my car service account. Then, I carefully closed the mail app, leaving it exactly as it had been. I stood up and walked to the window. Down on the street, the neighborhood was waking up. People were walking dogs. School buses were stopping. It all looked so normal. But inside this house, the foundation had rotted through. I had a choice. I could blow this up right now. I could drive to the Grand Bohemian and cause a scene that would end our marriage by noon. But Graham was a consultant. He spun narratives for a living. If I confronted him now, he would lie. He would say the room was for a client. He would say the car service change was a glitch. He would gaslight me until I doubted my own sanity. No. I watched a leaf fall from the oak tree in the front yard. Silence. Silence was the only way. If he thought I was ignorant, he would continue. If he thought he was safe, he would make mistakes. He would use the card again. He would meet her again. He would leave a paper trail so wide and so deep that by the time I was finished with him, he would not be able to spin his way out of a parking ticket, let alone a divorce. I turned away from the window and walked into the bathroom to start the shower. I would go to work. I would sit at my desk at Sterling Ridge. I would review ethics violations and compliance failures, and while I did that, I would build the case against my husband with the same ruthless efficiency I applied to every audit I had ever conducted. "Trip canceled," I whispered to the empty room. But the real journey was just beginning. In my line of work, there is a legal doctrine known as the fruit of the poisonous tree. It essentially means that if the source of your evidence is tainted, if you obtained it illegally, through hacking, breaking and entering, or surveillance without consent, then everything that grows from that evidence is inadmissible in a court of law. You can know the truth, but if you learned it the wrong way, it is worthless. You lose the settlement, you lose the house, you lose your reputation. I sat at my desk at Sterling Ridge Compliance. The glass door closed. The blinds adjusted just enough to signal that I was busy, but not enough to look suspicious. My computer screen was divided. On the left was the quarterly ethics report I was supposed to be reviewing. On the right was the live feed from my home security system. I had to play this game by the book. If Graham was going to destroy our marriage, I was going to dismantle his life, but I would do it with white gloves and perfectly legal subpoenas. I opened the archive for the doorbell camera. The system stores footage for 30 days. I scrolled back to the previous night, the hours before my scheduled flight, while I had been asleep upstairs, trusting that my husband was beside me. The timestamp read 12 minutes past 1 in the morning. The video was grainy in the night vision mode, but the figure was unmistakable. Graham slipped out the front door. He was not wearing his jogging clothes. He was wearing jeans and a dark hoodie. Hood up, head down. He moved with a practiced silence, easing the door shut so the latch would not click. He did not take his car. He walked down the driveway and turned left, disappearing into the shadows of the suburban street, likely to a waiting vehicle parked out of sight to avoid our camera's motion sensor range. I fast-forwarded. 3:40 in the morning. He returned. Same stealth, same silence. He looked disheveled. He paused on the porch for 10 seconds, checking his phone, the blue light illuminating a face that looked both exhausted and exhilarated. He had come back to bed less than 2 hours before he woke up to enact his performance about my flight. I exported the clip. I did not send it to my phone. I saved it to an encrypted external hard drive I kept in my locked office drawer. Next, I picked up my office landline. I did not use my cell phone. Graham paid the cell phone bill, which meant he had access to the call logs if he decided to look. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Pine and Weller Forensics, this is Marina, the voice on the other end answered, crisp and professional. Marina Klein was my best friend from college, but more importantly, she was a forensic accountant who spent her days hunting down embezzlers and corporate fraudsters. She could find a missing penny in a billion-dollar ledger. It is Delaney, I said. I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to not ask me if I'm okay until we are done with the technicals. There was a pause. Marina knew my tone. She shifted instantly from friend to operative. Go. I have a hostile actor in my personal finances, I said, keeping my voice low. I need to know how to preserve digital evidence of bank transfers and credit card charges in a way that creates an immutable chain of custody. No screenshots. I need metadata. Delaney, she breathed, the worry leaking through, but she caught herself. Okay, do not use screenshots. Defense attorneys tear them apart. You need to export the raw data files, CSV or OFX formats, directly from the banking portal. Then, you need to hash those files. Do you remember how to generate a digital hash? Yes, I said. I remember. Do it immediately, Marina instructed. If he suspects you know, he will try to purge the history or alter the descriptions if he has admin access. And check the recurring payments. Look for anything under $500. The smart ones keep it low to avoid the automated fraud alerts. I hung up. I had my instructions. I logged into our joint bank account. We had a primary checking account for bills and a savings account we rarely touched. But Graham also had authorized user status on my personal credit card, a card I had held since before we were married, which had a high limit for emergencies. I started with the joint checking. It was a bloodbath of small, seemingly innocent transactions. $50 at a florist in Uptown, $80 at a bistro I had never visited, $200 for consulting services paid to a vendor labeled CR Outreach. I frowned. CR Outreach. That sounded like a charity. I expanded the search range to the last 6 months. The pattern was rhythmic. Every Tuesday and Thursday, money left our account. Sometimes it was gas station charges in parts of the city Graham had no business being in. Sometimes it was gift cards purchased at grocery stores. Then I saw it. A recurring transfer to a sub-account I did not recognize. It was labeled House Buffer. In our household budget, we had discussed a maintenance fund for the roof or the HVAC system, but we had agreed to keep that in the main savings. I clicked on House Buffer. It was not a savings account. It was a high-yield checking account opened in Graham's name, but funded entirely by transfers from our joint income. The balance was $22,000. He had been siphoning money for over a year, but it was the way he was doing it that made my stomach turn. I looked at the deposit sources for the House Buffer account. They were not just direct transfers. They were labeled as reimbursements. I called Marina back. I am looking at a sub-account, I said, my eyes scanning the rows of data. He is paying for things on our joint card, dinners, hotels, these consulting services, and then he is transferring money from our joint savings into his private account, labeling it as reimbursement for business expenses. But the expenses are not business, they are personal, and the money he is reimbursing himself with is half mine. That is not just theft, Delaney, Marina said, her voice dropping an octave. That is structuring. He is creating a paper trail that makes it look like the joint account owes him money. If you divorce, he will present those ledgers to a judge and claim that the $22,000 is not marital asset, but repayment for loans he made to the household. He is laundering your marital assets into his sole property. I felt a cold sweat prickle on the back of my neck. It gets worse, I said. I see charges here for professional development on my credit card. He used my card to pay for a certification course, but the vendor is Hollis Consulting. He charged your card to pay his own shell company? Marina asked. Yes, $5,000 last month. Delaney, Marina said, and this time there was urgent fear in her voice. Stop looking at the affair. Forget the woman. You need to look at the liability. What do you mean? You are a compliance officer. Your name is on the regulatory filings for Sterling Ridge. You are a fiduciary. If Graham is running money through your personal credit card to a shell company that does not actually provide services, that looks like a kickback scheme. If that shell company is connected to anything illegal, gambling, drugs, or just tax evasion, and the money originated from your credit card, she did not have to finish the sentence. I stared at the screen, the numbers blurring into a terrifying realization. If the IRS or a forensic auditor looked at this without context, they would not see a cheating husband stealing from his wife. They would see Delaney Mitchell, ethics executive, funding a shell company that produced nothing. The timestamp on the $5,000 charge was 3 weeks ago. I realized then that Graham was not just planning to leave me, he was planning to sacrifice me. He knew that if we divorced, I would have the better lawyers. I had the family money. I had the higher salary. The only way he could win, the only way he could walk away with the house, the assets, and his dignity, was if I was destroyed, if I was under investigation, if my credibility was so shot that no judge would believe a word I said. He was setting me up. The house buffer was not just an exit fund, it was a war chest. And the charges on my card were not just carelessness. They were evidence he was planting against me. I sat back in my ergonomic chair. The hum of the office air conditioning sounded like a roar in my ears. I looked at the photo of us on my desk, taken 2 years ago in Napa. He looked so loving in that picture. His arm was around my waist, his smile bright. I reached out and placed the photo face down. I had been worried about a broken heart. I had been worried about the humiliation of being a woman whose husband looked elsewhere. But this was tactical. This was survival. I took a deep breath and opened a new spreadsheet. I named it Project Icarus. If he wanted to fly close to the sun using wax wings made of my money, I was going to be the one to turn up the heat. But I would not do it by screaming. I would do it by auditing him into oblivion. I started downloading the CSV files. I initiated the hash protocols Marina had described. I was not just a wife anymore. I was the lead investigator on the case of my own life. I checked the time. It was 11 in the morning. Graham would be checking into the Grand Bohemian soon. He would be feeling safe. He would be feeling clever. Let him. I typed a note into my digital log. Subject: Graham Hollis. Incident: financial structuring and potential embezzlement. Status: active investigation. The trip was canceled, but the war had just been declared. Finding the woman was not difficult. In the digital age, privacy is a myth we tell ourselves to sleep better at night. I had the merchant name from the credit card statement. The Lenox Grand. It was a boutique hotel on the edge of the Arts District, the kind of place that charged $12 for a bottle of water and prided itself on discretion. I also had the LinkedIn profiles of every employee associated with the venue because Graham was not the only one who knew how to do research. It took me less than 40 minutes to cross-reference the dates of Graham's business meetings with the public check-ins and tagged photos of the hotel's staff. Her name was Nina Vale. She was 34 years old. She was the event manager at the Lenox Grand. And looking at her digital footprint, I realized something that made my stomach tighten. Not with jealousy, but with a strange, cold recognition. She was organized. She was ambitious. She projected an image of perfect competence, In another life, we might have been friends. In this one, she was the reason my husband was funneling marital assets into a ghost account. I did not stalk her. Stalking implies obsession, and I was not obsessed. I was conducting due diligence. 2 days after the canceled flight, I left work at 4 in the afternoon. I told my assistant I had a dental appointment, but instead, I drove to the Arts District. I parked my car 2 blocks away and walked to the Lenox Grand. I was wearing my sharpest blazer and the heels that made me exactly 5 feet 10 inches tall. I did not look like a scorned wife. I looked like a client. The lobby smelled of white tea and expensive leather. I walked straight to the concierge desk, positioning myself so I had a clear view of the event planning office, which was separated from the main hall by a wall of frosted glass. The door was open, and there she was. Nina Vale was sitting at a glass desk, reviewing a stack of color-coded binders. She was striking, with dark hair pulled back in a severe professional bun that mirrored the way I often wore mine. She was talking to a young receptionist who was leaning against the doorframe, both of them laughing at something. It was the laugh that struck me. It was open, unguarded, and full of hope. It was the way I used to laugh 5 years ago, before I took the compliance job, before the mortgage, before I started finding receipts that did not add up. I watched her for 3 minutes. I cataloged her movements. She checked her phone constantly. Every time the screen lit up, her eyes darted to it with a hunger that was painful to witness. She was waiting. She was waiting for the man who was currently at home, probably rehearsing a lie about why he could not see her tonight. I turned my attention to the concierge. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice smooth and authoritative. "My name is Delaney Mitchell. I am reviewing some corporate charges on my statement from last month, and I need a detailed itemization for tax purposes. The charge is under Hollis Consulting, but the card used ends in 4022. That was my card. The concierge typed into his terminal. "1 moment. Ms. Mitchell, let me pull that up for you." While he typed, Nina walked out of her office. She passed within 3 feet of me. The air shifted. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. She was wearing Santal 33. It is a distinctive scent, heavy on sandalwood, cedar, and cardamom. It is not cheap, but the reason my heart hammered against my ribs was not the price. It was the history. That was the cologne I had bought for Graham for our 2nd anniversary. It was his scent. He had given it to her. Or worse, she had started wearing it to feel closer to him, to mark herself with his olfactory signature. It was a territorial claim. She did not notice me. She was too busy typing a text message. Her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked anxious. She looked like a woman who was holding her breath. "Here we are," the concierge said, sliding a printed folio across the marble counter. "It looks like a charge for a venue deposit and catering consultation." I looked at the paper. It was a lie. Of course, Graham did not have any events, but the hotel had billed it as such to make it look legitimate on a corporate card. "Thank you," I said, folding the paper and sliding it into my purse. That is exactly what I needed to close the file. I walked out of the hotel into the humid North Carolina afternoon. I had seen the enemy, and she was not a monster. She was a mirror, a younger, more naive, more desperate mirror, and I had the distinct impression that she did not know she was the other woman. She thought she was the next woman. When I got home that evening, Graham was in the kitchen, cooking pasta. This was part of his new offensive. Since the morning I had caught him, he had been performing the role of the perfect husband with aggressive enthusiasm. "Hey," he said, beaming as I walked in. "I made carbonara, your favorite." "It smells delicious," I said, forcing a smile. I walked over and kissed his cheek. He smelled of garlic and guilt. I wondered if he could smell the sandalwood on me, the phantom scent of his mistress that I had walked through in the hotel lobby. "So," he said, stirring the sauce, "I was looking at the calendar. You have been working so hard lately. I feel bad that you missed that seminar." Here it comes, I thought. "It is fine," I said, leaning against the counter. "I probably needed the rest." "Well, That is just it, he said, turning to face me, the wooden spoon dripping sauce onto the counter. I was thinking, there is that compliance summit in Seattle next month. You always talk about how much you love the Pacific Northwest. I checked, and I have enough miles to cover a first-class ticket for you. You should go. Take 4 days, maybe 5. He was practically vibrating with eagerness. Seattle is far, I said softly. It is beautiful, he pressed. I can book it for you tonight. I will handle the hotel, the transfer, everything. You just need to show up and relax. You deserve it, Delaney. You really do. He did not want me to relax. He wanted me 3,000 miles away. He wanted a time zone difference that would make it impossible for me to track his movements in real time. He wanted the house empty for 5 days so he could move freely. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the desperation in his eyes. He was terrified. He was juggling a mistress who was probably demanding more time, a wife who had almost caught him, and a financial scheme that required constant maintenance. He needed me gone so he could breathe. That is so sweet of you, Graham, I said, letting my voice drop to a register of pure gratitude. I will think about it. Let me check my workload tomorrow. Do not think too long, he said, a little too quickly. Flights fill up fast. I know, I said. Thank you for looking out for me. I went upstairs to change, leaving him to believe his manipulation was working. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my phone. I had the folio from the hotel. I had the name. I had the face. But then my phone buzzed. It was a text message. The number was blocked. There was no caller identification. I opened it. The message was short, brutal, and precise. If you are his wife, you should look into the name Crescent Outreach. He is not just sleeping with her. I stared at the screen. The blood drained from my face. Crescent Outreach. I had seen that name on the bank statements, CR Outreach. I had assumed it was a vendor, a cover for gifts or dinners, but this message suggested something else, something structural. And the sender? It could not be Nina. She was still in the lobby, waiting for a text from him. She was still in the dark. This was someone else, someone who knew about the affair and the money. I typed a reply, my fingers trembling slightly. Who is this? The response came 3 seconds later. Someone who is tired of watching him ruin lives. Check the nonprofit registry. Then nothing. I sat there in the silence of my bedroom, the smell of Graham's carbonara wafting up the stairs. I had thought this was a story about a man who wanted a new wife. I was wrong. This was a story about a man who was building an empire on lies, and I was just the investor he was planning to defraud. I stood up and walked to the closet. I needed to act normal. I needed to go downstairs and eat pasta and talk about Seattle, but my mind was already racing. Nina Vale was a distraction. She was the shiny object he was dangling with one hand, while the other hand did something far worse in the dark. I looked at myself in the vanity mirror. My eyes were hard. Okay, I whispered. Let us see what Crescent Outreach really is. I went downstairs. Graham was plating the food. Everything okay? He asked. Perfect, I said. I was just checking my schedule. I think I might be able to make Seattle work after all. He smiled, and the relief that washed over his face was so profound it was almost insulting. That is great news, he said. Yes, I answered, picking up my fork. It will be a trip to remember. I took a bite of the pasta. It needed salt, but I ate it anyway, because I needed my strength. I had a nonprofit to investigate and a mysterious ally to identify. Graham Hollis thought he was clearing the board, but he had just handed me the next clue to his destruction. Crescent Outreach sounded like a place that distributed blankets to the homeless or organized food drives for struggling families. The name was designed to evoke warmth, community, and unimpeachable moral standing. It was the kind of name that made you feel guilty for asking questions, but I asked questions for a living, and I knew that the vaguer the name, the dirtier the money usually was. I sat in my home office, the door locked, my screen illuminating the dark room. I had pulled the public tax filings for Crescent Outreach. As a registered nonprofit organization, their financial records. specifically the Form 990, were a matter of public record. It took me less than 10 minutes to find them on a charity watchdog database. On the surface, everything looked pristine. They listed their mission as supporting community development and urban revitalization. But when I scrolled down to the section detailing independent contractors and service providers, my heart stopped. The largest line item for professional fees was not for social workers or construction crews. It was for strategic consulting and media relations. The recipient of $145,000 in the last fiscal year was a company called GHC Strategies. GHC, Graham Hollis Consulting. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence. My husband had told me he was doing pro bono work for a local charity. I remembered the conversation vividly. He had stood in our kitchen 6 months ago, swirling a glass of Cabernet, looking me in the eye with that charming, earnest expression that I had fallen in love with. He had told me he wanted to give back. He said he was helping a small organization find its footing. He had made me feel proud of him. He had made me feel shallow for worrying about his billable hours when he was doing such noble work. It was all a lie. He was not donating his time. He was extracting capital. I picked up the phone and dialed Marina again. It was late, but I knew she would answer. "I found the link," I said the moment she picked up. "Crescent Outreach is paying Graham massive amounts, but where is the money coming from? A small charity does not have 6 figures to blow on consulting." "Send me the tax ID," Marina said, her voice accompanied by the rhythmic clicking of a keyboard. "I will run a cross-check on their donor list if it is disclosed, or I will look at their grant sources." I waited. The seconds stretched into minutes. "Delaney," Marina said, her tone shifting from professional to grave. "This is not a charity. This is a pass-through entity. Look at the incoming grants. 80% of their funding comes from a single donor-advised fund based in Delaware. The money flows in from the anonymous fund, sits in Crescent Outreach for 30 days, and then flows out to service providers like your husband. It is a classic laundering cycle. They use the nonprofit status to make the payments look like legitimate business expenses, tax-deductible and clean." "So he is washing money?" I asked, feeling a wave of nausea. "He is either washing it for someone else and taking a cut, or he is moving money he obtained illegally into a legitimized income stream," Marina explained. "But here is the kicker. If he is billing them for services he never rendered, that is wire fraud. And if he is using your joint assets or your credit identity to facilitate any part of this, like paying for the website hosting or the event deposits at the hotel, you are technically a co-conspirator." The room seemed to tilt. "He used my card for the hotel," I whispered. "He used my card for the certification course." "He is mixing the streams," Marina said. "He is painting you into the picture." The next morning, I did not go to Sterling Ridge. I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. Instead, I drove to the uptown office of Porter & Vance. Elaine Porter was a legend in Charlotte legal circles. She was known as the Ice Pick because she was cold, sharp, and could shatter a defense with a single tap. She did not handle amicable separations. She handled wars. Her office was on the 42nd floor, a corner suite with a view of the city that cost more than my first car. She sat behind a desk that looked like a slab of black obsidian. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair cut in a precise bob and eyes that missed nothing. I laid it all out: the affair, the canceled trip, the house buffer account, the Crescent Outreach connection, the emails I had photographed. Elaine listened without interrupting. She took notes with a fountain pen on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she capped the pen and looked at me. "You have a strong case for divorce," Elaine said, her voice dry and devoid of sympathy. "But we are not just looking at a divorce anymore. We are looking at a federal indictment waiting to happen. If this Crescent Outreach entity is flagged by the IRS, your husband goes to prison. The question is, does he take you with him?" "I did not know," I said. "I am the head of ethics at my firm. I would never—" "Ignorance is a defense, but it is an expensive one," Elaine cut in. "We need to prove that you were not just unaware, but that you were actively deceived. That is why the timeline is critical. I need you to document every instance where he tried to separate you from the finances, every time he told you to use a specific card, every time he hid a statement. She leaned forward. But most importantly, I need the behavior around that trip. The fact that he panicked when you did not leave, that is our gold. It proves he had a distinct timeline for his operations that required your absence. It proves premeditation. I have the email changing my car service, I said. He did it 2 days prior. Good, Elaine said. Keep gathering, but do not access anything that requires a password you do not legally have. If he gave you the password, fine. If you have to guess it or use software to crack it, do not touch it. We need clean hands. She opened a file on her desk. It was a copy of my marriage contract. I had sent it to her paralegal earlier that morning. Now, Elaine said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. Here is the part that Graham, for all his cleverness, seems to have forgotten. Or maybe he thinks he is smart enough to bypass it. She turned the document around and pointed to a paragraph on page 12. The infidelity clause is standard, Elaine said. If he cheats, you get more. But this is the nuclear option. This is the bad faith administration clause. We put this in because your father insisted on it, remember? I nodded. My father had been a banker. He trusted no one. It says here, Elaine read aloud, that if either party is found to have used marital assets to facilitate criminal activity or has engaged in financial fraud that endangers the joint estate, that party forfeits their right to equitable distribution and is solely liable for all debts incurred. I stared at the words, solely liable. Graham knows this, I said slowly. He read every word of this contract before he signed it. He is obsessed with details. Exactly, Elaine said. He knows that if he gets caught doing something illegal with his own money, he loses the protection of the marriage, he loses the house, he loses his share of your retirement. She sat back, linking her fingers together. So, why would a smart man commit fraud when he has a contract like this hanging over his head? Elaine asked. I thought about the charges on my credit card. I thought about the car service booked under my profile. I thought about how he had insisted I go to Seattle, urging me to leave town. He is not committing fraud in his name, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He is setting it up to look like I am the one doing it. Elaine nodded slowly. Think about it. Delaney, the consulting company billing your card. The car service changes under your login. If Crescent Outreach goes down, he can claim he was just a consultant doing his job. But you were the one financing the operation. You were the one authorizing the payments. He can claim he was the duped husband, and you were the ethics officer using your knowledge of the system to run a scam. I felt cold all over. He is not just leaving me for Nina, I whispered. He is framing me. He wants to divorce me, trigger the clause against me, and walk away with everything while I go to jail. That, Elaine said, is exactly what it looks like. He is building a narrative, the loving husband who tried to save his wife from her own greed. I stood up and walked to the window. The city looked peaceful below, but I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. He wants to destroy me, I said. He does not just want a new life. He wants my life to burn down so he can build his on the ashes. So, Elaine said, her voice sharp as a whip crack, what are you going to do? Are you going to be the victim, or are you going to be the compliance officer who caught him? I turned back to her. My fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard rage. I want him to think he is winning, I said. I want him to feel so safe that he signs his name on the dotted line, and then I want to bury him. Elaine smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had given me. Excellent, she said. Go home. Be the loving wife. Let him book the trip to Seattle. Let him think the plan is working, and while he is busy digging your grave, we will be busy pouring the concrete for his... I left the office with a new mission. I was done crying over a lost marriage. I was fighting for my freedom. That night, I went home and found Graham in the living room, looking over some Architectural Digest magazines. I was thinking, I said, keeping my voice light. You were right about Seattle. I think I should go. I could use the break. Graham looked up, and the relief in his eyes was immediate. Really? He asked. That is fantastic. Honey, I will book the tickets tonight. You will not regret it. I am sure I will not, I said. I am sure it will be a trip that changes everything. He smiled, oblivious to the double meaning. He picked up his phone, presumably to text Nina that the obstacle was being removed. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. He was planning to sacrifice me. He was planning to trade my reputation for his freedom. I took a sip of water. Trip canceled? No, the trip was just beginning, but this time I was the one flying the plane, and Graham Hollis was the one who was going to crash. The art of the trap lies not in the complexity of the mechanism, but in the irresistible nature of the bait. Graham was a man who believed he was starving for freedom, so I decided to serve it to him on a silver platter. It was Wednesday evening, 3 days after the canceled flight incident. The house was quiet, filled with the low hum of the refrigerator and the scratching of Graham's pen on paper in the living room. I walked in, holding my phone, and let out a long theatrical sigh. You are not going to believe this, I said, rubbing my temples. Sterling Ridge is demanding I make up for the missed seminar. They rescheduled the regulatory workshop for this weekend in Atlanta. Mandatory attendance. I watched him carefully. For a split second, he looked annoyed. Annoyed that I was speaking to him. Annoyed that his evening was interrupted. But then the words processed. This weekend. Atlanta. Mandatory. The transformation was instantaneous. He set down his pen. His shoulders dropped 3 inches. The tension that had been radiating off him for days evaporated, replaced by a solicitous warmth that made my skin crawl. Oh, honey, that is terrible, he said, standing up and walking over to massage my shoulders. You must be exhausted, but you know how important these compliance certifications are. You cannot afford to fall behind. I know, I said, leaning into his touch, suppressing the urge to recoil. I just hate the idea of traveling again so soon, and booking a flight this last minute is going to be a nightmare. Do not worry about that, Graham said, his voice smooth and eager. I will handle it. I still have those platinum points. I can get you on the 6 o'clock flight Friday evening, first class. You can sleep the whole way there. I will book the hotel too. The Ritz? You love the Ritz. He was moving too fast. He was practically pushing me out the door. He wanted to control the logistics. He wanted to know exactly which flight I was on, exactly which hotel room I would be in, so he could calculate the precise window of time he had to operate without looking over his shoulder. That would be amazing, I said softly. Thank you, Graham. I do not know what I would do without you. We are a team, he said, kissing the top of my head. I will take care of everything. He spent the next hour making reservations. He forwarded me the confirmation numbers with a cheerful, all-set subject line. He was humming as he did it. He was humming because he thought he had just been handed a 48-hour pass to finish whatever dirty work he had started. Friday came. I packed my bag for the second time that week. Graham insisted on driving me to the airport. The car ride was filled with his idle chatter about the weather and his upcoming golf game. He was giddy. He dropped me off at the terminal curb, gave me a long, lingering kiss, and told me to call him when I landed. Be safe, he said. I will, I replied. I walked through the automatic doors, waited until his sedan merged back into traffic, and then walked straight through the terminal to the arrivals level. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver an address that was not my home, but was not Atlanta either. It was a Residence Inn, 3 miles from our subdivision. I checked into room 304. It was a sterile beige room with a view of a parking lot. I did not unpack. I set up my command center on the small desk, my laptop, my encrypted hard drive, and a second burner phone I had purchased with cash. I sent a secure message to Elaine. The subject is clear. I am in position. Elaine replied 2 minutes later. Motion for temporary restraining order is drafted. If money moves, we file within the hour. Judge is on standby for emergency review. I messaged Marina next. Watcher is active. Marina's reply was a screenshot of a dashboard showing our bank accounts, the house buffer account, and the credit card usage. I have set triggers for any transaction over $500. If he buys so much as a pack of gum at a gas station, we will know. I opened the feed from the home security cameras. The house was empty. Graham was likely driving back from the airport, thinking about how he would spend his weekend. I poured myself a cup of lukewarm hotel coffee and waited. At 7 in the evening, Graham's car pulled into the driveway. He entered the house, tossed his keys on the counter, and immediately pulled out his phone. He did not call me. I knew this because my phone remained silent. He dialed someone else. "She is gone," he said. I could hear him clearly through the kitchen camera's microphone. "Yes, until Sunday night. We are clear." He listened for a moment, then nodded. "I will bring the package tonight. We need to sign off on the final transfer structure before Monday. I want this done." "The package?" I leaned closer to the screen. He went upstairs. I switched the feed to the hallway camera. He went into his home office and closed the door. We did not have a camera inside the office. That was one line of privacy we had kept. But I knew what was in there. The shredder, the safe, the high-speed scanner. I waited for an hour. My muscles were tight, locked in a state of hypervigilance. At 8:30, the office door opened. Graham walked out. He had changed from his suit into dark jeans and a black polo shirt. Under his arm, he carried a thick manila envelope. It was bulged with documents. He walked down the stairs, his pace purposeful. He checked his watch. He looked like a man on a mission. I watched him leave through the front door. He did not set the alarm. He got into his car and backed out of the driveway. "He is moving," I texted Marina. "He has physical documents." "I see a gas charge," Marina replied. "He filled up 5 minutes ago, tracking location via the car's connected service." I sat back, exhaling a breath I did not know I was holding. He was taking documents to someone, likely Nina, or perhaps the mysterious partner behind Crescent Outreach. But what documents? If he was moving money, he would do it digitally. Physical papers meant signatures. Physical papers meant contracts. Or they meant evidence. I looked at my laptop. On the shared drive network for our home, there was a folder for the scanner. Graham usually cleared it out, but he was rushing. He was arrogant. I accessed the home network remotely. I had administrator privileges. I was the one who set up the Wi-Fi. I navigated to the printer's temporary cache. There was one new file, scanned at 8:15 in the evening. File name, Draft Class Submission, File PDF. My hand hovered over the mouse. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was it. This was the deal. This was the sale of the house, or the transfer of the funds. I double-clicked the file. It opened. It was not a real estate contract. It was not a bank transfer authorization. It was a formal letter addressed to the North Carolina State Ethics Commission, and below that, a carbon copy addressed to the Board of Directors at Sterling Ridge Compliance. The subject line read, "Formal whistleblower complaint regarding financial malfeasance and ethical violations by Delaney Mitchell." The room spun. I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling out of the chair. I scrolled down, my eyes devouring the words that were designed to end my life. The letter detailed a sophisticated scheme of embezzlement. It claimed that I, using my position as a compliance officer, had set up a shell company called Crescent Outreach to launder kickbacks from vendors. It claimed that I had coerced my husband, a consultant, into processing these payments through his accounts to hide my tracks. It claimed that he had only recently discovered the depth of my deception and was coming forward out of a moral obligation to the truth. Attached to the letter were the receipts: the hotel charge at the Lenox Grand on my credit card, the payment for the certification course, the car service changes, the transfers to the house buffer account, which he had cleverly framed in the narrative as money I had forced him to hold for me. He had taken every single piece of evidence I had found, every breadcrumb of his own guilt, and he had inverted it. He had rewritten the story so that he was the victim and I was the criminal mastermind. He was not just stealing the money. He was planning to send me to prison for stealing it. The envelope he was carrying tonight. He was not going to hide it. He was going to have it notarized. He was going to meet someone to finalize the affidavit before mailing it on Monday morning, the same time he filed for divorce. He wanted to hit me with a divorce filing and a federal investigation on the same day. He wanted me so buried in legal defense that I would settle for nothing just to stay out of jail. I felt a scream building in my chest, a primal, wounded sound. I looked at the screen, at the lies typed in the same font he used for our holiday newsletters. Delaney Mitchell has systematically abused her fiduciary duties. He hated me. He did not just fall out of love. He had to hate me to do this. You do not do this to someone you once promised to protect. You do this to an enemy you want to annihilate. My phone buzzed. It was Marina. He is at a 24-hour notary and shipping center on 4th Street. Of course he was. He was sealing the bomb. I stared at the PDF. My hands stopped shaking. The shock was receding, replaced by a clarity so cold it felt like ice water in my veins. He thought he was smart. He thought he had built the perfect frame. But he had made one critical error. He assumed I was in Atlanta. He assumed I was asleep in a hotel room, oblivious to the knife he was sharpening. He did not know I was 3 miles away, reading his script. I picked up the phone and called Elaine. It was late, but this was war. He is not hiding assets, I said, my voice steady, devoid of all emotion. He is framing me for the embezzlement. I have the draft complaint. He is getting it notarized right now. There was a silence on the other end. Then, the sound of a chair scraping back. "Send me the file," Elaine said. Her voice was not lawyerly anymore. It was predatory. If he files a false report with a regulatory agency, he moves from civil fraud to criminal perjury and malicious prosecution. He just handed us the weapon to kill him, Delaney. He thinks I am the perfect victim, I said. He thinks I am the rule follower who will be too stunned to fight back. Let him think that, Elaine said. Let him mail it. Let him trigger the investigation, because once he swears to that story under oath, and we prove he is lying, he never gets out of the hole. I want him to mail it, I said. The realization crystallized in my mind. If I stopped him now, it was just a draft. It was just a thought crime. But if he mailed it, it was action. Are you sure? Elaine asked. Once that letter lands at Sterling Ridge, you will be suspended. It will get ugly. I am sure, I said. He wants to destroy my career? Fine, I will let him try. But when the smoke clears, I want him to lose everything, not just the money. I want him to lose his freedom. I hung up. I looked at the camera feed again. The house stood dark and empty, a stage waiting for the final act. I was not the victim in this story. I was the evidence. And Graham Hollis had no idea that the file he was holding was not my death warrant, but his own confession. Trip canceled, I whispered to the empty hotel room. But the destination has changed. We are going to court. I sent the message to Nina Vale at 9 a.m. on Saturday. I used the burner phone, and I kept it brief. I have documents regarding Graham Hollis and the Crescent Outreach account that involve your signature. Meet me at the Freedom Park Stone Bridge in 45 minutes. If you do not come, I will have to hand them to the FBI. I did not sign it. I did not have to. Freedom Park is a sprawling green space in Charlotte, full of joggers and families. But the old stone bridge near the duck pond offers a pocket of privacy if you stand at the center. I arrived 10 minutes early. I wore sunglasses and a trench coat, not for drama, but because I did not want anyone from my social circle to spot me. When Nina arrived, she looked nothing like the composed professional I had seen at the Lenox Grand. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a hoodie, her hands jammed deep into her pockets. She walked with a jerky, nervous energy, scanning the path behind her as if she expected Graham to jump out of the bushes. She stopped 5 feet away from me. She recognized me immediately. I saw her throat work as she swallowed. You are her, she said. Her voice was thin, brittle. You are the wife. I am Delaney, I corrected calmly. And we do not have time for the soap opera portion of this conversation. I am not here to scream at you. I am not here to beg you to leave him. I am here because we have a problem." "I do not have a problem," Nina said, trying to summon a defiance she clearly did not feel. "Graham told me everything. He told me you are vindictive. He told me you handle all the finances and that you are trying to trap him because you know the marriage is over." I almost laughed. It was impressive how closely Graham's lies mirrored the reality he was trying to manufacture. He was projecting his own crimes onto me, using Nina as the audience to test his script. "Did he?" I asked. "Did he also tell you that he drafted a whistleblower complaint to the Ethics Commission last night accusing me of embezzlement? Did he tell you that he plans to send me to federal prison so he can keep the house and the money?" Nina froze. "That is a lie. He said you were the one moving money. He said he was just trying to protect himself." I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not the whole file, just the page listing the vendors. I held it out to her. "Look at the third line, Nina." She hesitated, then took the paper. Her eyes scanned the text. Vendor: the Lennox Grand. Authorized signatory for vendor: N. Vale. Service: corporate event sponsorship. "I see my name," she said, her voice trembling. "So what? He sponsored an event. It was for charity, Crescent Outreach." "There was no event, Nina," I said softly. "I checked the hotel logs. There was no banquet, no fundraiser, but $40,000 was paid to the hotel, and then refunded to a different account minus a cancellation fee. Did you authorize that refund?" She went pale. She looked down at her shoes. "He said it was a bookkeeping error," she whispered. "He said he needed to move the funds to a different liquidity pool for the charity. He asked me to sign the override." "You signed a fraudulent financial instrument," I said. "And because you are the event manager, that makes you an accessory to wire fraud. Graham did not just sleep with you, Nina. He made you his accomplice. When the forensic accountants come, and they are coming, they are not going to see a girlfriend. They are going to see a co-conspirator." Nina made a small, choked sound. She crumpled the paper in her hand. "He loves me," she said, but it sounded like a question. "He said he was leaving you this weekend. He said you were going to Atlanta, and when you came back, he would have the papers ready." "He does have the papers ready," I said, "but they are not divorce papers. They are an indictment against me. And do you really think, once he sends his wife to jail, he is going to settle down with the woman who knows where the bodies are buried? You are a loose end. Nina, loose ends get cut." Tears began to slide down her face from under her sunglasses. She wiped them away angrily. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "You should hate me." "I do not have the energy to hate you," I said honestly. "I am too busy trying to stay out of prison, and right now, you are the only person who can help me stop him, not because you owe me anything, but because if I go down, he will eventually throw you under the bus too. It is what he does. He uses people." She looked at the ducks floating on the water below. She was shaking. The illusion of her romance was shattering, replaced by the cold, hard machinery of Graham's manipulation. "I thought it was weird," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "He never let me keep copies of the contracts. He always took them with him. He said he had a secure filing system." "Where does he keep them?" I asked. "The physical copies." "He has a safe," Nina said. "But not at home, at his office in the city. He keeps a USB drive in there too. He told me once, when he was drunk, that the drive was his insurance policy. He said it had the real map of the money flow, just in case the partners ever tried to screw him over." My pulse quickened. The partners. That confirmed there were others involved in Crescent Outreach. "Do you know the combination?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "He made me get a file from there once when he was out of town. It is his birthday, 091285. "I need that USB drive," I said. "I can get it for you," Nina said, a sudden spark of desperation in her eyes. "I have a key to his office building. I can go tonight. I can steal it." "No," I said sharply. She looked surprised. "Why not? It proves everything, right?" "Because if you steal it, it is inadmissible in court," I explained. And if you are caught, he will press charges for burglary. We have to do this the right way. We have to be cleaner than he is. I took a step closer to her. I need you to write a statement, I said. I need you to write down exactly what he asked you to sign, when he asked you to sign it, and the fact that no events actually took place. I need you to state that he took the copies of the contracts. Can you do that? Nina hesitated. She was terrified. If I do that, she said, I lose my job. The hotel will fire me for signing off on fake charges. If you do not do it, I countered, you go to federal prison for fraud. Losing a job is better than losing 5 years of your life. And if you cooperate now, my lawyer can negotiate immunity for you. You become a witness, not a defendant. She bit her lip, weighing the cost of her love affair against the cost of her freedom. There is someone else, she said suddenly. I frowned. What do you mean? It is not just me, Nina said, looking up at me, her eyes wide with fear. The banking side. The reason the transfers always went through so fast, without any holds. Graham did not just use me, he used my brother. I felt a chill run down my spine. Your brother? Darren, she said. Darren Vale. He is a branch manager at one of the regional banks downtown. Graham met him through me. They started playing golf together. Then Graham started asking him for favors, overriding hold periods on checks, approving transfers that were just below the reporting threshold. My God, he had infected her entire family. Darren called me last week, Nina continued, her voice rushing now. He was scared. He said the volume of money was increasing. He said he warned Graham that the algorithms were going to catch it soon. Graham told him to shut up and process the transactions, or he would ruin Darren's career. Graham has emails. Delaney. He has emails where Darren agreed to bend the rules. This was the leverage. This was why Graham felt so safe. He had compromised everyone around him. He had built a shield of human collateral. Okay, I said, my mind racing. This changes things. We need to protect Darren too, but only if he talks. He will talk, Nina said. He is a good man. He wanted to help me. He thought Graham was going to be his brother-in-law. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Graham had used this woman's hope for a family to dismantle her actual family. Listen to me, I said, grabbing her arm gently. Do not tell Darren anything yet, and do not tell Graham you saw me. Act normal. If Graham calls you, answer. If he tells you he loves you, say it back. We need him to feel safe for 48 more hours. And then what? Nina asked. I have a lawyer named Elaine Porter, I said. She is going to draft a preservation order for that USB drive. We are going to serve a subpoena on Graham's office Monday morning. If we know exactly where it is, the police can seize it before he destroys it, but we need your statement to get the warrant. Nina took a deep breath. She looked at the park, at the trees, at the normal world continuing around us while our lives burned down. He promised me we would go to Italy, she said, a tear slipping out again. He showed me brochures. He was never taking you to Italy, Nina, I said. He was taking you to the cleaners. She wiped her face with her sleeve. She straightened her posture. The crying was done. I will write the statement, she said. I will meet you at your lawyer's office tomorrow morning, Sunday. Can you open on a Sunday? For this, I said, Elaine will open the building herself. Okay, Nina said. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of respect. You are not what he said you were. He said you were cold. He said you did not know how to feel anything. I feel plenty, I said. I just choose to use it instead of letting it drown me. I am sorry, she said, for everything. Don't be sorry, I said, turning to walk away. Be smart. That is how we survive him. I walked back to the car, my heart pounding. I had come looking for a witness and found a smoking gun, the USB drive, and Darren Vale. Graham Hollis had thought he was playing a game of chess against a solitary opponent. He did not realize that the pawns he had captured were about to turn around and checkmate him. I dialed Elaine as soon as I was in the safety of my car. We have a problem, I said. And by problem, I mean we have the location of the digital ledger and a second witness inside the bank. You are terrifying, Elaine said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I will start typing the affidavits. Get some sleep. Delaney, Monday is going to be a bloodbath. I do not need sleep, I said, putting the car in gear. I need justice. I drove back to the hotel. The image of Nina's shattered face stuck in my mind. Graham had broken her. He had broken me. But he had made one fatal mistake. He had broken us into sharp, jagged pieces, and now we were going to cut him. Monday morning arrived not with the warmth of the sun, but with the cold, precise click of a mouse button. We had coordinated the strike to coincide with the opening of the banking day. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, while Graham was presumably sitting in his office sipping his espresso and feeling like the master of his universe, 3 separate legal and corporate missiles were launched simultaneously. It was a triage of destruction, designed to cut off his money, his credibility, and his escape route in a single breath. I was sitting in the conference room at Porter & Vance, my phone face down on the mahogany table. Elaine stood by the window, her tablet in hand. Filed, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. The ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order regarding the dissipation of marital assets has been submitted to Judge Holloway. We flagged the House buffer account, the primary joint checking, and specifically, the business accounts for Graham Hollis Consulting. How long until the freeze hits? I asked, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. The bank has a fiduciary duty to act immediately upon receipt of the court stamp, Elaine replied. If he tries to buy a sandwich at noon, the card might work. If he tries to wire $10,000 to an offshore account, the system will lock him out and flag the transaction as potential fraud. He is paralyzed. Delaney. He just does not know it yet. At 9:15 in the morning, my laptop pinged. It was the secure drop from Marina. The forensic report was a thing of terrifying beauty. It was 60 pages of flowcharts, transaction logs, and cross-referenced IP addresses. Marina had mapped the entire circulatory system of Crescent Outreach. She showed the money leaving our joint account, entering the nonprofit, swirling through a series of vendor payments, and then landing in accounts controlled by Graham or used to pay off debts that legally belonged to the business, not the marriage. But the most damning part was the appendix. It contained the sworn affidavit from Nina Vale, signed and notarized late Sunday night. It detailed the fake events, the pressure to sign, and the existence of the physical ledger. It also contained the preliminary statement from her brother, Darren, who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for a leniency recommendation. He confirmed that Graham had explicitly asked him to bypass federal reporting requirements for transactions over $10,000 by breaking them into smaller chunks, a crime known as structuring. The math does not lie, I whispered to myself, scrolling through the columns of red ink. At 9:30 in the morning, I launched my own offensive. I knew Graham had likely mailed his whistleblower complaint on Saturday night or early this morning. He wanted to get ahead of the narrative. He wanted Sterling Ridge to see me as a thief before I could prove I was a victim. I opened my work email. I had drafted the letter on Sunday. It was addressed to the chairman of the board and the general counsel of Sterling Ridge Compliance. Subject: Urgent disclosure regarding external malicious activity targeting firm personnel. I did not write it as a plea for help. I wrote it as a security alert. I informed them that I was in the process of a high-conflict divorce involving a spouse who had engaged in significant financial irregularities. I stated that I had evidence suggesting this individual intended to leverage my position at the firm to fabricate false claims of misconduct as a litigation tactic. I attached a redacted copy of the police report we had filed regarding the potential identity theft involving my credit cards. I hit send. By doing this, I neutralized his bomb. When his letter arrived, it would not look like a whistleblower report. It would look like the desperate retaliation I had already warned them about. I had turned his weapon into a dud before it even landed on their desk. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the final package went out. This one was to the Internal Revenue Service's whistleblower office. It was stripped of all emotion. No stories about infidelity. No mentions of heartbreak. Just numbers, tax ID numbers, wire transfer codes, discrepancies between reported income and actual lifestyle. I sat back in the leather chair. The silence in the room was heavy. Then, the phone started ringing. It was 10:12 in the morning. I looked at the screen. Husband. I let it ring 3 times. I needed to sound breathless, distracted. I needed to sound like a wife who was rushing from a breakout session in Atlanta, not a woman sitting 3 miles away watching his life dismantle. I picked up, "Hey, honey, I only have a minute. The keynote speaker is going over, and I have to run to the next hall." "Where are you?" Graham asked. His voice was tight. It lacked the smooth, confident cadence he usually employed. It was the voice of a man who had just tried to log into a bank portal and seen the words, "account restricted." "I told you," I said, infusing my tone with a breezy innocence. "I am at the conference center. Why? Is everything okay?" "The card," he snapped. "I just tried to pay the vendor for the office renovation supplies. It declined. It said, 'Refer to issuer.' Did you change something on the joint account?" He was lying. There were no renovation supplies. He was trying to move money. He was testing the perimeter. "That is weird," I said. "Maybe it is a fraud alert? I did buy that expensive coffee this morning at the airport. You know how sensitive the bank algorithms are. I can call them on my lunch break." "No," he said, too quickly. "No, do not call them. I will handle it. Just, are you sure you did not receive any notifications?" "Nothing," I lied. "Graham, I really have to go. My boss is waving at me." "Wait," he said. "When exactly are you coming home? Is it still Sunday night?" "Yes," I said. "Unless I can get an earlier flight, why?" "Just nothing. Just miss you. Bye." He hung up. I looked at Elaine. "He hit the wall." "He hit the first wall," Elaine corrected. "Now he's going to panic. He is going to try the secondary accounts. Then he's going to realize those are frozen too. Then he's going to try to access the physical cash or the ledger." "The police are already en route to his office to secure the premises pending the search warrant for the USB drive." I said, "He cannot get in." For the next 2 hours, my phone was a constant source of vibration. Graham called 4 more times. He sent 12 texts. "Call me. We need to talk. Something is wrong with the bank. Are you sure you are in Atlanta?" That last one made me pause. "Are you sure you are in Atlanta?" Paranoia was setting in. He was starting to feel the phantom presence of the truth. He was realizing that the coincidence of the accounts freezing while I was away was too sharp, too precise. I did not answer. Silence is a weapon. It allows the imagination to conjure worst-case scenarios that are far more effective than any threat I could voice. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the tone of the messages changed. The aggression vanished. The frantic questions about money stopped. My phone buzzed again. I looked down. "Delaney, I have been doing a lot of thinking since you left." I raised an eyebrow. I showed the screen to Elaine. She read it and let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I know things have been distant between us." The next text read, "I know I have been working too much. I feel like we are losing each other." I stared at the bubbles appearing and disappearing as he typed the next part. "I do not care about the money or the work. I care about us. When you get back, I want us to sit down. I think we should look into marriage counseling. I want to fix this. I want to be the husband you deserve." I felt a wave of nausea so strong I almost gagged. "He is pivoting," I said, my voice cold. "He knows the walls are closing in. He cannot move the money. He cannot get into his office, and he suspects I know something, so now he is trying to charm the snake." "It is a classic narcissist collapse strategy," Elaine noted, pouring herself a glass of water. "When force fails, they revert to victimhood and affection. He wants to lure you back in. He wants you to come home, drop your guard, and unlock the accounts so we can fix our problems." "He wants to buy time," I said. "He thinks if he can get me into a therapist's office, He can gaslight me into believing the frozen accounts are a misunderstanding, or he wants to get me in the room to find out exactly how much I know before he decides whether to beg or to run. I typed a reply. I had to keep the play going. I had to make him believe his manipulation was working, just enough to keep him in Charlotte until the warrant was executed. I am glad you said that. Graham, I wrote, I have been feeling it too. We can talk about it over dinner when I get home. I love you, he replied instantly. See you soon. I wrote back. I did not say I loved him. I could lie about my location. I could lie about my knowledge of his crimes. But I could not type those 3 words. That was a compliance line I refused to cross. He is terrified, I said, setting the phone down. He is not proposing counseling because he wants to save the marriage. He is proposing it because he needs a witness to his good intentions before the indictment drops. It does not matter what he wants, Elaine said, gathering her files. The judge just signed the order. The temporary restraining order is live. The assets are officially frozen by court decree, not just bank algorithm, and the search warrant for his office was approved 12 minutes ago. I looked out the window at the Charlotte skyline. Somewhere out there, Graham was staring at his phone, thinking he had successfully bought himself a reprieve. He thought he had played the emotional card and won. He did not know that while he was Googling marriage counselors to perform his act, I was finalizing the itinerary for his destruction. One more thing, I said, turning to Elaine. The whistleblower complaint he sent to my company. When it arrives, I want to be the one to open the investigation file. You want to investigate yourself? Elaine asked. No, I said, standing up and smoothing my blazer. I want to ensure that when the external auditors come in, they have a roadmap. I am not just going to defend myself. Elaine, I am going to use his own complaint to authenticate the evidence I have gathered. He put his signature on the lies. I am just going to add the footnotes that prove they are crimes. My phone buzzed one last time. I will cook dinner Sunday, Graham wrote. Your favorite. Carbonara, again, the meal of betrayal. Enjoy the pasta, Graham, I whispered, because it is the last decent meal you are going to have for a very long time. The house felt different in the dark. It was not the comforting silence of a home at rest, but the heavy, suffocating stillness of a trap waiting to be sprung. I had entered through the side door of the garage 20 minutes ago, stepping over the threshold with the care of a bomb disposal technician. I had not turned on a single light. I knew the geography of this floor plan better than the lines on my own palm. I knew that the 3rd floorboard in the hallway creaked, and I knew that the moonlight sliced through the sheer curtains of the living room at exactly 8:30 in the evening, creating a pale, rectangular spotlight on the coffee table. That was where I sat. On the table in front of me sat my laptop, the screen dark, the lid open. Beside it was a glass of water I did not intend to drink. I checked my phone one last time. The brightness was turned all the way down. I looked at the image I had sent Graham 3 hours ago. It was a photograph of my suitcase standing by the departures gate at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. It was a convincing photo. It was also dated from a business trip I had taken to Boston 14 months ago. I had cropped out the date stamp and the destination monitor. To Graham, that photo was proof of my absence. It was the green light he had been waiting for since Friday. It was the signal that the compliance officer was effectively removed from the jurisdiction, leaving the criminal free to operate. I placed the phone face down. I waited. The silence was absolute. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant, rhythmic thumping of my own heart. I was not afraid. Fear is a reaction to the unknown, and I knew exactly what was going to happen. I had written the script, casting Graham in a role he did not even know he was playing. At 8:45, headlights swept across the front window, blindingly bright for a split second before vanishing as the car turned into the driveway. The engine cut. I heard the heavy thud of a car door closing. Then, the sound of keys jingling, the scratch of metal on metal as the key slid into the front door lock. The door opened. Graham stepped into the foyer. He did not turn on the lights. He did not call out my name. A husband coming home to an empty house might shout a hello to the void. just out of habit. A guilty man enters in silence. He was on the phone. He walked past the entrance to the living room, heading toward the stairs. His silhouette was sharp against the dim light from the street lamps outside. He was moving with a frantic, jittery energy. "She is gone," he said into the receiver. His voice was not a whisper this time. It was a command, harsh and clipped. "I got the confirmation photo. She is in the air. We have a 12-hour window before she lands and checks her messages." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. "No," Graham snapped. "Do not go to the office. It is too risky. Meet me at the hotel. Go to room 1416. I just need to grab the hard drive backup from the safe here. And then I am coming to you. We wipe the server tonight." Room 1416. He was not going to therapy. He was not staying home to pine for his wife. He was coordinating the final purge of the evidence. He put his foot on the first step of the staircase. "Graham," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the tomb-like silence of the house, it sounded like a gunshot. He froze. His foot hovered in the air for a second before crashing down onto the step. He spun around, his body rigid, peering into the darkness of the living room. "Who is there?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of aggression and terror. I reached out and clicked the switch on the table lamp. The light flooded the room, harsh and sudden. It carved out a small island of illumination in the darkness, catching me sitting in the wingback chair, my hands folded calmly in my lap, my laptop sitting like a judge's gavel on the table. Graham stood by the banister. He was wearing black jeans and a dark jacket. His face went white. It was not the gradual paling of someone feeling sick. It was the instant, bloodless shock of a man seeing a corpse rise from the grave. He lowered the phone slowly. The call was still connected. I could hear a tiny, tinny voice squawking from the speaker, asking what was happening. He ended the call with a thumb that shook visibly. He looked at me. He looked at the front door, as if checking to see if it was still there. Then he looked back at me. "You," he stammered. The air seemed to leave his lungs. "You didn't leave?" It was the same question he had asked days ago, in the kitchen, when the first flight was canceled. But this time, the context had shifted tectonically. Then, it was an inconvenience. Now, it was a catastrophe. I looked him dead in the eye. I did not smile. I did not blink. "Trip canceled," I said. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with irony. Graham did not ask why. He did not ask how. He did not apologize. He did not fall to his knees and beg for forgiveness. He did not try to explain that he was planning a surprise party or that I had misunderstood the phone call. His eyes darted to the laptop on the table in front of me. Panic is a primal thing. It bypasses logic. It bypasses morality. In that second, Graham Hollis ceased to be a human being and became a cornered animal. He realized that the computer in front of me likely contained the death blow to his life. He lunged. He crossed the distance between the stairs and the coffee table in 2 strides, moving with a violence I had never seen in him. He did not reach for me. He reached for the machine. He slammed his hands down on the laptop, grabbing it with such force that the power cord ripped out of the socket. "Give me that!" he shouted, his voice cracking. He scrambled back, clutching the laptop to his chest like a shield, his breathing ragged and wild. He looked at me with wild eyes, expecting me to scream, to fight him for the device. I did not move. I stayed seated, watching him with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen under glass. "It is password protected," he spat out, his fingers fumbling to open the lid, presumably to smash it or find a way to wipe it. "What did you see? What did you send? Tell me." "You can break it if you want, Graham," I said softly. He stopped, his hand raised as if to smash the laptop against the corner of the fireplace. He looked at me, confusion warring with his rage. "It is just hardware," I continued, my voice steady and cold. "The data is not in the box anymore. It is in the cloud. It is on a secure server at Porter & Vance, and a copy was uploaded to the forensic unit at Sterling Ridge 20 minutes ago." He lowered the laptop slowly, His chest was heaving. "You," he whispered, "you have been here the whole time." "I never went to Atlanta," I said. "I was at the Residence Inn on 4th Street. I watched you leave the house on Friday. I watched you come back. I saw the email you sent to the ethics board accusing me of embezzlement. And I saw the draft you printed on Saturday night." He flinched as if I had struck him. "You knew," he said. "You let me send it." "I let you verify your own intent," I corrected. "If I had stopped you, it would have been a mistake. By letting you mail it, I made it a felony, perjury, malicious prosecution, filing a false instrument." He stared at the laptop in his hands, realizing it was useless. It was not a weapon, it was a brick. He dropped it on the rug. It landed with a dull thud. "Room 1416, I said, repeating his own words back to him. "Is that where Nina is? Or is that where you are meeting the partners from the bank?" The color that had drained from his face did not return. He looked at the phone in his hand, realizing that the person he had just been talking to, the person he had told to go to the room, was now walking into a trap I had likely already set. "You spoke to Nina," he said. It was not a question. "Nina provided a sworn affidavit," I said. "So did Darren. They chose self-preservation over loyalty to a sinking ship. You are the only one left on the boat, Graham." He began to shake. It started in his hands and traveled up his arms until his whole body was vibrating with the force of his collapse. He looked around the room, at the familiar furniture, the wedding photos on the mantel, the life we had built together. He realized that the walls were still standing, but the roof had been ripped off, and the sky was falling on his head. "I can fix this," he said, his voice sounding thin and delusional. "Delaney, listen to me. We can fix this. I can withdraw the complaint. I can say it was a misunderstanding. We can go to the bank together tomorrow. I can explain." "You cannot explain away a federal investigation," I said. "The IRS whistleblower complaint was filed this morning. The temporary restraining order on the assets was signed at noon, and the police are currently waiting for a judge to sign the search warrant for your office safe." He took a step back, bumping into the wall. "You did this," he accused, his eyes wet with tears of self-pity. "You ruined us." "I did not ruin us," I said, standing up finally. I smoothed the front of my dress. "I just turned on the lights." He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, he did not see his wife. He saw the compliance officer. He saw the person whose job it was to catch liars, and he realized with a sickening jolt that he had spent 5 years sleeping next to the one person on earth he should never have tried to deceive. "Where are you going?" he asked as I picked up my phone. "I am going to a hotel," I said. "A real one this time. You can stay here tonight, Graham. But do not try to leave the state. Your passport has been flagged. And do not try to go to room 1416. I walked toward the door, stepping around the laptop on the floor. "Why?" he whispered. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "Because," I said, looking back at him one last time, "the trip is canceled." I walked out into the cool night air, leaving him standing in the spotlight of the lamp, holding a phone that no longer had anyone on the other end worth calling. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing him in the prison of his own making. The morning after the lights went out on our marriage, Graham did not flee. He did not pack a bag and disappear into the ether. That would have been the action of a coward. And while Graham was many things, his narcissism prevented him from believing he had actually lost. Instead, he decided to burn the village down to save himself. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking black coffee. It was 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning. I had not slept, but my mind was operating with a jagged, chemical sharpness. The laptop Graham had tried to smash was sitting on the counter, plugged in and humming, a digital tombstone he could not look at. Graham walked into the room. He had showered and put on a suit. It was a terrifying display of compartmentalization. He adjusted his cufflinks, poured himself a coffee, and leaned against the island as if we were discussing a renovation project rather than a federal indictment. "You know," he said, his voice steady but carrying a razor-thin edge of malice, You might have the accounts frozen. Delaney, you might even have the police looking at the office, but you are forgetting one thing. You are a compliance officer. Your entire career is built on the perception of integrity. I looked at him over the rim of my mug. Is that a threat, Graham? It is a reality check, he said, taking a sip. If you push this, if you try to drag me into court, I will go public. I will go to the industry journals. I will tell them that you used Sterling Ridge resources to conduct an unauthorized surveillance operation on a private citizen. I will tell them you hacked my accounts. I will paint you as a paranoid, power-hungry executive who abuses her access to destroy her husband. You will be toxic. No firm in the country will hire you. It was a dirty play. He knew that in my industry, the mere accusation of an ethics breach could result in administrative leave. He was trying to hold my career hostage in exchange for a settlement. He smiled, and it was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. I have nothing to lose, he said. But you? You have a reputation. And by the way, do not count on that money coming back. The $22,000 in the buffer account, the $40,000 from the hotel refunds, it is gone. He tapped his temple. I moved it weeks ago, he lied. It is in a place no forensic accountant will ever find. Offshore, layered through 3 different shell cores in jurisdictions that do not answer to U.S. subpoenas. So go ahead. Divorce me. You will get half of 0. He was bluffing. I knew he was bluffing because Marina had been tracking the packets of data all night. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Marina. He is lying. The funds never left the domestic clearinghouse. He tried to route them to a crypto exchange in Malta, but he messed up the wallet address authentication. The money is sitting in a holding limbo at the originating bank. I have the trace number. I looked at Graham. He looked so smug, so sure that he had outsmarted the system. You mean the transfer to the Valletta exchange? I asked. The one that failed due to a mismatched key on Sunday night? Graham's smile faltered. His eyes widened slightly. You did not move the money, Graham, I said, reading the text from Marina. You froze it, and since the court order hit yesterday at noon, that holding account is now locked. You did not hide it. You handed it to the lawyers. He slammed his mug down on the counter. Coffee splashed over the rim. You do not know what you are talking about, he snapped. He pulled out his phone. I am calling Nina. She will vouch for the events. She will testify that those charges were legitimate deposits. He was desperate. He was reaching for his last ally, unaware that she had already defected. He dialed. I watched him. He held the phone to his ear, his knuckles white. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Then, the automated voice. The subscriber you are trying to reach is not available. He hung up and dialed again. Same result. She is not going to answer, Graham, I said. She is busy, he muttered, his thumb hovering over the screen. She is at work. She is at her brother's house, I said, and she is not answering because she spent yesterday afternoon with my lawyer, signing an affidavit that details how you coerced her into falsifying invoices. She knows you used her. She knows about the other women you messaged on LinkedIn. She knows she was just a signatory to you, not a partner. Graham stared at me. The betrayal on his face was almost comical. He felt betrayed that his mistress had chosen not to go to prison for him. You turned her, he whispered. You manipulated her. I told her the truth, I said. That is not manipulation. That is disclosure. Graham shoved his phone into his pocket. He looked around the kitchen, his eyes landing on the granite countertops, the high-end appliances, the physical manifestations of the life he was losing. Fine, he said, straightening his jacket. Keep the cash. Keep the job. But this house is a marital asset, and I am not walking away from my equity. He walked to the front door and opened it. Come in, he shouted to someone waiting in the driveway. I stood up. This was a move I had not anticipated. A man walked in. He was short, wearing a cheap suit that was too large for him, carrying a briefcase that looked scuffed. He did not look like a real estate agent. He looked like a shark. This is Mr. Vance, Graham said, gesturing to the man. He represents a private equity group that specializes in distressed asset liquidation. I signed a quitclaim deed this morning at 6 o'clock. I sold my 50% interest in this property to his firm for cash. Immediate payout. Graham looked at me with triumphant venom. You want the house, Delaney? You can share it with Mr. Vance's company, or you can buy them out at market rate plus a premium. Either way, I got my money. I am cashed out. It was a nuclear option. He had sold his ownership rights to a predatory investor just to get liquid cash before the freeze fully took hold. He was willing to destroy the value of our home just to spite me. Mr. Vance stepped forward, holding a document. Mrs. Hollis, I have the paperwork here. We will be conducting an inspection of our half of the premises today. I felt a spike of adrenaline. It was a clever move. Dirty, but clever. But Graham had forgotten one thing. Elaine Porter did not sleep. I picked up my iPad from the counter. I opened the email that had arrived 10 minutes ago. Mr. Vance? I said, my voice projecting authority. Before you step further into my home, you should check the county clerk's digital registry. The man frowned. We filed the deed at 8:30 this morning. And at 8:31, I said, Judge Halloway filed a lis pendens on this property, alongside a specific injunction invalidating any transfer of title initiated after the temporary restraining order was signed yesterday. The TRO was time-stamped 12:15 yesterday afternoon. I turned the iPad around so they could see the screen. It was the court order, stamped and sealed. Any contract you signed with my husband this morning is legally invalid from the start, I said, using the Latin term Elaine had drilled into me. It is legally worthless, and if you attempt to enforce a void contract on a property under active litigation, my lawyer will add your firm to the conspiracy lawsuit we are filing on Friday. Mr. Vance stopped. He looked at the screen. He looked at Graham. You said you had clear title, Mr. Vance said to Graham, his voice dropping to a growl. You said the wife was not aware. She was not supposed to be, Graham shouted, losing his composure entirely. She was supposed to be in Atlanta. I am leaving, Mr. Vance said. He turned and walked out the door without looking back. Graham stood alone in the foyer. The silence rushed back in, louder than before. He had tried to smear me, failed. He had tried to hide the money, failed. He had tried to call his mistress, failed. He had tried to sell the house, failed. Every door he tried to open was locked, and I was holding the keys. He sagged against the wall. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a pathetic, wheedling posture that disgusted me more than his aggression. Delaney, he said, his voice cracking. Tears welled up in his eyes. He slumped his shoulders, trying to look small, trying to look like the man I had fallen in love with. I am sorry. I do not know what happened. I got in over my head. The consulting business was failing. I needed cash to keep it afloat. I just wanted to fix it before you found out. I did not want to disappoint you. He took a step toward me, hands open, pleading. I was under so much pressure, he sobbed. I felt like I was drowning, and Nina, she was just there. She listened. It did not mean anything. I was just lost. Delaney, I lost my way. Please, do not destroy me for making a mistake. We can fix this. I will go to therapy. I will do whatever you want. It was a masterful performance. The victim, the misunderstood husband who just tried too hard to be a provider and crumbled under the weight of expectation. If I had been the woman I was a week ago, I might have believed him. I might have felt a pang of sympathy. But I was not that woman anymore. I looked at him. I looked at the tears running down his face. A mistake, I repeated flatly. Yes, he begged. A terrible mistake. I was panicked. If it was a mistake, I said, my voice quiet and deadly, and if you were just trying to save the business, I took a step closer to him, invading his personal space. Then why did you create the folder on your laptop titled Project Scapegoat? Why did you draft a whistleblower complaint accusing me of your crimes 3 weeks ago? Why did you edit the car service logs to make it look like I was the one meeting the clients? Graham stopped crying. The tears turned off like a faucet. His face went slack. He started, but the words died in his throat. You do not frame someone by mistake, Graham, I said. You do not spend a month manufacturing evidence against your wife because you are lost. You do it because you have a plan. You wanted to send me to prison. You wanted to steal my life. I waited. I wanted him to answer. I wanted him to try to spin that. But he couldn't. He stared at me, his eyes empty and cold. The mask of the victim fell away, revealing the predator underneath, and for the first time, he had nothing to say. His silence filled the hallway. It was absolute. It was the loudest confession he could have made. That is what I thought, I said. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. Get out, I said. This is my house, he whispered, a final, weak protest. Not anymore, I said. The police are on their way to execute the search warrant on your home office. If you are here when they arrive, they will arrest you for obstruction. If you leave now, you might have time to call a lawyer who isn't me. Graham looked at the open door. He looked at me. He realized that the game was not just over. The board had been flipped. He walked past me. He did not look back. He stepped out into the bright, unforgiving morning light, carrying nothing but the suit on his back and the weight of a life he had dismantled with his own hands. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. Click. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The door was locked, and for the first time in days, I could breathe. The conference room at Porter & Vance was designed to intimidate. It was a glass box suspended 40 stories above the street, air-conditioned to a temperature that required a jacket. I sat at the head of the table. Elaine was to my right. To my left sat two men Graham had never met. One was the regional compliance officer for the bank where Graham held his business accounts. The other was a forensic investigator from the district attorney's office named Agent Miller. We were not here to negotiate custody of the china. We were here to offer a plea deal. Graham walked in at 10 o'clock in the morning. He looked better than he had yesterday. He had shaved, and he was wearing his Navy power suit, the one he wore when he was closing a contract. He carried a leather portfolio and a confident stride. He saw me and offered a tight, tentative smile, ignoring the other people in the room. He thought this was a mediation. He thought he could charm, barter, or bully his way into a settlement that left him with his reputation intact. He pulled out a chair and sat down. Delaney, he said, nodding to me. Then he turned to Elaine. Ms. Porter, I assume these gentlemen are your junior associates? I hope we can keep this civil. I am prepared to be generous regarding the equity in the house, provided we seal the record. Elaine did not look up from her file. She slid a single document across the polished mahogany table. It was heavy, bound in a blue cover. This is not a negotiation, Graham, I said. My voice was quiet, stripping the room of any oxygen he hoped to consume. This is a surrender treaty. Graham looked at the document. The title read, Stipulation of Settlement and Admission of Financial Fraud. He laughed. It was a nervous, cracking sound. I am not signing that. I told you. The transfers were legitimate business expenses. You cannot prove intent. Mr. Hollis? The man to my left spoke up. It was the bank representative. At 9:30 this morning, our automated compliance system flagged a series of 42 transactions originating from your consulting firm over the last 18 months. They triggered a suspicious activity report for money laundering. Your accounts have not just been frozen by the civil court. They have been seized by the federal government pending investigation. Graham's smile vanished. That is a mistake. I can explain the structure. You do not have to explain it, Agent Miller said from the end of the table. His voice was like grinding gravel. We already know how it works. You receive funds from a donor-advised fund in Delaware into Crescent Outreach. You strip 40% for consulting fees to your shell company. You send the rest to offshore vendors that do not exist. Graham went pale, but he held his ground. I am a consultant. I cannot be held responsible for the legitimacy of my clients. That is the funny part, Agent Miller continued, leaning forward. You think you are the mastermind, Mr. Hollis. You think you invented this scheme to hide money from your wife, but we have been watching Crescent Outreach for 2 years. It is not a charity. It is a funnel for a cartel operating out of the tri-state area. They use idiots like you, greedy, desperate consultants, to wash their cash. You are not a partner. You are a mule. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched Graham's face. I watched the arrogance drain away, replaced by the terrifying realization that he was not playing a game against his wife anymore. He was playing a game against people who did not file lawsuits. They filed death certificates. I did not know, Graham whispered. I swear, I just thought it was a tax loophole. I did not know who they were. Ignorance is not a defense when you structured the payments to avoid detection, I said. You broke the law, Graham, and you tried to frame me for it. I pointed to the document on the table. You have one choice, I said. You sign that agreement. You admit that you, and you alone, orchestrated the financial transfers. You admit that I was unaware and that you falsified the records to implicate me. You agree to a full divorce with 0 spousal support and 0 claim to the marital assets, as per the infidelity and fraud clauses in our prenuptial agreement. In exchange, I will hand over the hard drive and the evidence I have gathered directly to Agent Miller, and you will cooperate as a state witness against the Crescent Outreach Network. If you help them catch the big fish, you might only do 2 years in minimum security instead of 20 years in federal prison. Graham stared at the paper. His hands were shaking so hard he had to grip the edge of the table. And if I do not sign? He asked. Then I walk out of here, I said. Elaine files the civil fraud suit. Sterling Ridge files the malicious prosecution suit, and Agent Miller arrests you in the lobby for money laundering and conspiracy. You will be arraigned by noon. His phone buzzed on the table. It vibrated violently against the wood. He looked down. It was a text message from his personal banking app. Alert. All accounts suspended per Department of Justice order. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide, rimmed with red. He looked like a child who had broken a window and realized the house was falling down. You cannot prove I acted alone, he said, his voice rising in a last, desperate attempt to spread the blame. Nina signed the checks. She was the event manager. She authorized the flow. The door to the conference room opened. Nina Vale walked in. She was not wearing her hoodie this time. She was wearing a gray suit, modest and professional. She looked tired, but her chin was high. She did not look at Graham. She walked to the end of the table and placed a notarized affidavit in front of Agent Miller. This is my statement, Nina said, her voice steady. It details every time Graham Hollis asked me to sign a blank invoice. It details the dates he coerced me to override the hotel billing system, and it includes the text messages where he promised me he was setting up his wife to take the fall. Graham stared at her. Nina, baby? Do not speak to me, Nina said. She looked at him then, and there was no love left in her eyes, only the cold clarity of a woman who had woken up from a nightmare. I am not your baby. I am witness number 1. Graham slumped back in his chair. He looked at the bank rep. He looked at the federal agent. He looked at Nina. And finally, he looked at me. Did you plan this? He hissed, his voice full of venom. Did you set me up? Was this whole thing a trap from the beginning? I looked at him. I thought about the nights I had spent crying. I thought about the fear I had felt when I found the charges on my card. I thought about the moment I realized he hated me enough to send me to prison. I did not set you up, Graham, I said calmly. I just stopped being the only person in this marriage who followed the rules. You built the trap yourself. I just sprung it. He looked at the pen lying on top of the document. He knew it was over. The cartel connection meant he was in danger. The federal seizure meant he was broke. The affidavit meant he was guilty. The only lifeboat in the ocean was the piece of paper I was offering him. He reached for the pen. His hand trembled. He signed his name on the signature line. The scratching sound of the pen on the paper was the sound of his life ending. Done, he whispered. Elaine snatched the document before the ink was dry. She checked the signature, then nodded to Agent Miller. "We have a deal," Elaine said. "Mr. Hollis is now in your custody for debriefing." Graham stood up. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He did not look at me again. He walked out of the room flanked by the agent and the investigator, a man marching toward his own ruin. I sat in the chair for a moment longer. The room was quiet. Nina looked at me, gave a small, sad nod, and left the room. "It is over, Delaney," Elaine said softly. "You are free. The house is yours. The debt is his. Your record is clean." I stood up. I felt light, as if gravity had released its hold on me. "Thank you, Elaine," I said. I walked out of the office building. It was early afternoon now. The sun was high and bright, reflecting off the glass towers of Charlotte. The air smelled of exhaust and ornamental cherry blossoms. I took a deep breath. It tasted like oxygen. It tasted like truth. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Elaine. "It is done. The judge just signed the final order. He is gone." I looked at the screen. I did not smile. I did not cry. I simply deleted the thread, put the phone in my purse, and began to walk. I had a flight to catch, a real one this time, and I was going to sit in first class, drink champagne, and toast to the only trip that really mattered. The trip back to myself. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment below and tell me your city or country, so we can connect. If you enjoyed watching Graham get exactly what he deserved, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to see the truth win.